Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad that you could all join us today for the session with staff from the South Dakota Arts Council discussing their touring and teaching artist roster opportunities. I know I'm really excited for this grant to open up again this fall. The roster programs have been so impactful to the state, and I know I've had the good fortune to perform through I think both of the programs at one time or another. So have definitely personally seen their impact, and really excited that both Rebecca Cruse, the deputy director, as well as Sarah Carlson, the arts program specialist, could join us today to talk more about the programs. First, I want to say a quick thank you to our funding partners. We couldn't do this without the South Dakota Arts Council, both from them joining us today and also from a funding and support side, as well as support from the Bush Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. So we're going to do this in two sections today. We'll do a little bit on the Artists in Schools and Communities program, which you'll hear more about, and then the touring arts component. And I think we're going to do a Q&A after each section, specifically about each portion. And then we'll do a big Q&A again at the end with some extra time if other questions have come up. But if you could, to ask questions to the panelists, please use the Q&A button down at the bottom of the program. That will allow us to be able to track the questions more easily and make sure we get to all of them and get back to you. And then please also use the chat function just to talk to other attendees or to send a note to the panelist or just to say hello. So now I would like to quickly turn it over to Executive Director Jim Spears to say a couple of words. I know Jimmy is out traveling out in the Rapid City, Black Hills area and taking a bunch of meetings with arts organizations out there, and excited that he could jump in for a little bit today.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Andrew. And I am traveling. I'm sitting at Marlin's, a place we all know if you've spent much time in South Dakota. I'm sitting at Marlin's, enjoying a cup of coffee and listening to this webinar. I've been on the road a bit, and Sherry Cosell and I have met with some folks out here. And I just have to say, I won't take much time because there's a lot we could talk about. But in general terms, I'll just say it's been so exciting to see all the developments happening across the state. I was up in Eagle Butte last week. Spent some time down in Kyle, South Dakota this week, and various other places out west. And it's really exciting just to see how much energy and excitement and new projects are happening. So, you know, this post-pandemic, I know we're not quite done with the pandemic yet, but just this idea of getting back out and creating art, building community, it's happening, and it's been great. I am excited for this webinar. I'm glad folks are on here to listen to the Arts Council folks talk about some ongoing grant opportunities. We so value our partnership with the South Dakota Arts Council, and this is a great team. The way we all work together to hopefully serve the entire state in the sector. Also, I just want to say, continue to follow our website, our newsletter, and Facebook at Art South Dakota, because we are working on a few new a few new webinar and professional development opportunities. We're hoping to restart some of our happy hour programs here in the coming months. We'll be talking about the upcoming May, which seems like a long way away, but it's just around the corner. We're going to have our big statewide arts conference coming up. And then also there's going to be some new grant opportunities statewide through both the Arts Council and the Humanities Council that we'll be talking about here in the next few weeks. So lots happening, and we'll get started with some great information today. And I'm going to turn it over now to Rebecca Cruse and Sarah Carlson. Thank you all for joining us. And Andrew, thanks for your work making this all happen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jim and Andrew, for hosting this webinar for us through Arts South Dakota. We really appreciate the partnership that we have with you all there, and can't wait until we can all be in the same place at the same time the next time we do one of these webinars, or one of these workshops maybe. That would be fantastic to see everybody in person again. I'm Rebecca Cruse. I'm the Deputy Director at the South Dakota Arts Council, and I also manage our arts and education programming, including the Artists in Schools and Communities roster of artists and grant program, which is our residency program, Artists in Residence. Sarah's going to introduce herself, and then we'll jump into all of the information.
Here we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Carlson, and I am the Arts Program Coordinator here at the South Dakota Arts Council here in Pierre. And I also co-manage the Art for State Buildings program, and really excited to work with performing artists, visual artists, and artists of all disciplines through the program that we're going to be talking about today.
So as we get started here, we wanted to show you a side-by-side comparison of the two programs that we currently have open for application for artists to join the rosters. We have two separate programs, the Touring Arts Program and the Artists in Schools and Communities Residency Program. These are two separate rosters that artists may apply to become part of. And I'm going to go through an overview of Artists in Schools and Communities and explain the process and details of that program. And then Sarah's going to give an overview of Touring Arts. We'll pause after each for some specific questions. And then at the end, we'll open this up to all questions that anybody has as we go along here. So feel free to jot those down, type them into the chat, or hang on to them until the end. So Andrew, could you please flip the slide? So the Artists in Schools and Communities program is a teaching artist residency program for 501c3 nonprofit organizations in South Dakota to bring professional teaching artists into their facilities and communities to host residency programming. Next slide, please. So I'll give a quick overview of what is a teaching artist residency. So first of all, a teaching artist, there are some certifications and professional, some educational acclimates that people can take on if they want to become a certified teaching artist or have that as part of their educational background, but that is not required for this program. To us, for our artist roster, a teaching artist is an artist educator who is able to translate their creative process into an instructional setting. Teaching artists represent all arts disciplines, including craft, dance, literary arts, traditional arts, storytelling, theater, multicultural arts, all of the arts genres that you can think of. We have teaching artists who represent those when they go out into communities. And we're always looking for more and new people to join the roster. Teaching artists are a really important resource for schools and communities, especially across South Dakota. We have many schools that do not have robust arts education programming. So teaching artists fill a lot of gaps across the state of South Dakota. A teaching artist residency could be short-term. By that we mean 1 week, that's the minimum length, or long-term, sometimes residencies are a month or even a semester long. They include arts integration instruction that supports higher order thinking skills, so helping students learn math, science, social studies, other content areas through the arts is part of a teaching artist residency. They could also be curriculum-based projects using K-12 arts education standards and non-arts education standards. They could meet standards in other content areas, but through arts programming. They also provide core arts instruction in the artist specialized discipline, sometimes professional development for educators, for community members if you're working in an arts council setting or something like that. And also they provide lifelong learning in the arts through community events, classes, and workshops. So residencies are not always held in schools. They're held in all types of different sites across South Dakota, including healthcare facilities, veterans facilities, senior centers, community education centers, and all sorts of different places. So any 501c3 nonprofit in South Dakota is eligible to host an artist in residence. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of a few residency examples from South Dakota. We have a dance residency that was held in conjunction with Flutter Productions. There is a photo from a mural residency held in Fulton, and then one at the Discovery Center in Pierre, South Dakota, which brought a musical ensemble to all of the second grade classrooms throughout the week, and then brought all of the second graders together for a large concert at the end of the week. Next slide, please. How are teaching artists compensated? Big question, and obviously one that any artist applying to the roster will be really interested in hearing. So the Artists in Schools and Communities program requires that residencies last for a minimum of 1 week, and the fees are based on a per week basis. So artists are paid a set weekly fee, and then they're also reimbursed for mileage and lodging is provided in the community where they're in residence. The weekly fee for individual artists is $1,200. We have a few ensembles and duos who are on the roster, and they are paid at a weekly rate of $2,000. The Arts Council provides grants to the sponsoring organizations, and those grants include half of the artist's fee, plus the mileage reimbursement, round trip mileage from the artist's hometown to the residency community. The sponsoring organization covers the other half of the artist's fee. They also cover supplies and consumable supplies needed for a residency, and they provide lodging for the artist, generally in a motel. That is what we ask residency sponsors to provide. But there are some places where either they have housing available at no cost that they can provide to artists, or in some very small towns in South Dakota, they may arrange for a homestay if there aren't hotels or motels available. Also, if an artist is within daily driving distance of a residency, they may provide mileage in lieu of housing. Next slide, please. How much work do teaching artists get through the AISC program? So this is always a big question. It varies greatly among artists. Some artists are working, maybe 20 weeks a year, but most, I would say, receive closer to 5 weeks of requests throughout a year. But artists are encouraged, strongly encouraged, to network and build relationships and get organizations to apply to bring you in to host or to carry out a residency. So we have a lot of sponsoring organizations who participate in the program every year. Some of them bring in the same artist every year, and that can be a really steady source of work for an artist, but others are really looking to have a diverse experience for their students, and they look for different artists every year. The South Dakota Arts Council markets our programs, but we don't market individual artists or ensembles or anything like that. So we want to really keep it fair and not try to push certain artists for the program, but we do market our programs, and then we encourage you all to jump onto those campaigns and then push them out to market yourselves as well. Next slide, please. So how do sponsoring organizations, find artists to host for residencies? So through the application process, we have a list of artists on our website. Each artist has a profile for applicants to go through and read what kind of work you do and request to bring you in for the program. Artists are endorsed through the program for a 3-year period. And when you first join the roster, you'll be posted on our website. Your profile will stay there as long as you remain on the roster. The Artists in Schools and Communities program only provides grant funds for residency work with artists who are on this roster. We don't provide funding for other residency work with artists who are not endorsed to our own roster. Next slide. Here's one example of an artist profile on our website. So artists are able to script this as they so desire and put in the information they want about their residency work, their artistry, and their preferences with working with what kinds of audiences and students they would like to work with. Next slide, please. A brief overview of the teaching artist responsibilities and workflow. Teaching artists have the flexibility to review and consider each residency request. So you will get a request and you'll be able to accept or decline it through our online system. Artists will need to engage in a residency planning process with a project director for each residency. This should happen at least a month ahead of a residency start date. Most artists are working on this well in advance of that as they plan out their year of work. Artists are also responsible for completing some paperwork an agreement between the artist and sponsor that we provide, and generally like a W-9 for the sponsoring organization before they can pay you. During residencies, artists spend about 20 hours per week on arts instruction with students, professional development, or public presentations. And then about 10 hours per week are spent in residence where the artist has the time to focus on their own work during this time. And the sponsor should be providing a space to accommodate that work. When artists aren't in residence, they just go about their usual work. And we also provide opportunities for professional development for teaching artists and workshops and other events throughout the year as well. Next slide. Required application materials are listed both in our applicant portal and in our guide to grants. Here's a quick overview of them. You need an applicant profile in the GoSmart online grant system. If you have already done that in the past for other applications, that applicant profile still works for this application as well. We have narrative questions, which are outlined in the sample application and also in the guide to grants. You can find all of those narrative questions there and work on it offline. You don't have to do it all in the online grant system. We'll need a resume highlighting your relevant work experience and education, references, letters of support, at least one, up to 3. Next slide, please. And then you'll need a residency plan that outlines what you'll be doing during the week, what outcomes you will hope to achieve with students, and how you will evaluate that plan. We also ask for artistic documentation and support materials, digital images, manuscripts, videos, audio clips, programs, articles, reviews. Those kinds of support materials are really valuable and help panelists review your application and understand how you work as an artist. And then the final step is just printing and completing the signature page and mailing it to our office. We do not need to have that by the September 1 deadline. We just ask that you do it as you submit your final application, that you print that out and get it in the mail to us. So now we'll take just a quick 5 minutes for some questions specific to this program, and then we'll come back and answer everybody's questions at the end again.
Great. Well, thanks, Rebecca. There's a couple of questions that have come up. One from Jeff. I'll get your question to them in the final Q&A. Lawrence had a good question. I believe he's talking about the professional development opportunities. So Lawrence, let me know if I'm misinterpreting this, but he asks, can you talk about the educational opportunities, which I assume is a question of that professional development portion that you mentioned.
Sure, thanks for the question. So artists who are on the Artists in Schools and Communities Teaching Artist roster are also eligible for professional development grants called our Educator Grant through the South Dakota Arts Council. So Educator Grants are provided generally to K-12 teachers, but also for professional development for our teaching artists on our roster. You can apply for up to $1,000. This grant does not require a match to attend any kind of teaching artist professional development you would like to attend. We also do a teaching artist track at our state arts conference. We'll do a roster artist orientation and professional development session as part of the pre-conference for that. And then when it's not a conference year, we'll try to do some kind of gathering during the year, either virtual or in person, to bring artists together, both to network with one another, learn from each other, and also to get a little extra professional development in there.
Great, thanks. Another one now from Myra. Do you need to be a South Dakota resident to be on the roster?
You do not. Out-of-state artists are eligible to apply for our teaching artist roster. We do note that we provide preference to in-state artists and artists in surrounding states. That helps cut down on travel costs. But we do have artists who maybe used to live in South Dakota and now live in Pennsylvania who still take part in the artist roster. We do ask out-of-state artists to block book all of their residency requests, so we only are providing travel payment for one trip to the state.
Great. Good questions coming in here. Jana Anderson asks, what are some examples of really successful residency projects from the past, or where could they find some of those examples if they wanted to kind of model some of their work on that?
Oh boy, that's a big question. You know, I didn't cover this, Jenna, because we're sort of more in the process and explanation of the program here. I strongly encourage you to join our water cooler chats on Thursdays. That would be a good time to really get into some of that. And some of the other teaching artists join those calls and could talk about those as well. We have information coming later in the session about how to join those. But you know, the residencies really vary a lot depending on who the artist is and what kind of work they like to do. Sometimes we're seeing mural projects. Sometimes we have we have a couple of artists who work at the Susie Kappa Art Center in Sioux Falls, and they're really there all year long. I'm sorry, not Sioux Falls, in Rapid City. They're really there all year long working with the professional artists who are employed there. These are artists with disabilities who are employed by Susie Kappa Art Center, and we have artists in residence who work with them throughout the year. They, you know, maybe are doing 30 weeks each in that setting and constantly teaching and learning from the artists at the Susie Kappa Art Center. We have artists who go in and work at Sanford Health, and you know, some are general teaching to a certain standard when you're working in a school, but some are more long-term projects that may have a final installation or a final presentation as part of it. So it's up to the artist really to decide what kind of residency they want to offer. And then often those will change based on what setting you're working in. You know, as you're talking with a project coordinator, you might adjust your residency to fit their needs.
Great. Some good questions coming in here still. We'll get through one or two more, and then a couple of these we'll keep for the joint Q&A at the end, because I think they'll apply a little bit to both programs. But Lawrence asks, are there any opportunities for out-of-state residencies? So I guess this would be a question of the people for artists and schools and communities, the organizations that are applying for their end of the grant. Do they have to be South Dakota organizations, or do you work with out-of-state?
The sponsoring organizations do have to be in South Dakota. However, there are several states who host rosters like this for teaching artists, and many of them allow out-of-state artists to be part of their rosters. So certainly, if you're part of our roster, we would provide, you know, any kind of reference you may need to get onto another state's roster, and you could certainly look into the other Arts Council programs and use us as a reference and use your work and experience with us as work samples.
Great. Well, the other questions in the Q&A we will definitely get to in the next chunk of question time. But maybe now let's turn it over to Sarah Carlson to talk a little bit more about the Touring Arts Program.
Hi, everybody. It's Sarah Carlson. And I feel a little bit like the Touring Arts Program is maybe a little more easier to understand here based upon all of the requirements of AISC. Mine will be a little bit of a shorter presentation. But welcome those who are interested in the Touring Arts Program. And the mission of this program is really to get the arts widely distributed throughout the state in all the communities. And it is multidisciplinary, and it's also especially interesting for me getting involved here because we have new organizations and new artists, individuals, we have ensembles. We have all kinds of groups and trios and duos who are finding out a little bit more about this program. And so we'll go to the next slide. And what we'd like to do is establish who is a touring artist. And so applicants who are interested in applying for this grant opportunity are professional artists and ensembles, like I said, arts organizations and educational institutions in various art disciplines. And so currently we have about 33 artists and ensembles on our roster, and it runs the gamut, everyone from individuals to the South Dakota Symphony Orchestra. And so it's pretty widespread. Touring artists present performances, exhibits, programs, and are a part of a touring arts roster for a 2-year period. So when you're thinking about what you want to present, it isn't just about music. It's not about theater. It is all kinds of different opportunities and programs. And touring artists have a recent history of quality performing and presenting. So if you're getting this information and you're thinking, maybe it's not right for me to maybe apply this time around, but you should have a recent history of performing and touring. We do have some of our artists who have traveled and performed who have never been a part of this program before, but it might be their opportunity to expand their opportunities. That's one thing I'd like to mention here is there are artists who are professional, who tour and perform in communities already across the state, and our grant funding is just assisting them to do more. Touring artists also must be willing to travel outside of their home community. And so when we say home community, we mean your zip code. That's something that we've established in some of these larger population cities. Home community, you could spend a whole year in your own home community traveling and touring and performing with different organizations. So we say zip code to help establish that. And that way you'll perform throughout the state of South Dakota. And examples of artists on the current touring arts roster, it is a 2-year commitment, if you will. And so you're on that roster. So when we say roster, we're marketing you to nonprofit organizations, schools, and communities throughout the state from our chair here at the South Dakota Arts Council, and also with our partner who is helping us today, Art South Dakota, as our marketing advocate, if you will. And so when we look at examples, it is truly multidisciplinary. There are presenters, they're performing for engagements and event booking, so not residencies. So that's like the difference between what Rebecca manages, the artists in schools and communities, are residencies, and the touring arts program is engagements and event bookings. There are some of our performers on the roster who might have a 2 or 3 day exhibit or presentation that takes place in various communities across the state. But just as a reference, it's not truly residencies with this program. And we have, like I said, individuals to large ensembles. We have singers, songwriters, actors. We have historical actors and storytellers. We have poets. We have writers. One of our current roster artists is the South Dakota Poet Laureate. We have cultural, and we have hoop dancers. We have puppet makers. We have children's singers, songwriters, and guitarists, visual art exhibit presenters. Like I said, symphony orchestras. We have university jazz combos. And truly the list does go on. So when you're thinking about, will I fit? Will my art form fit into this? Most likely it will, and our review panels are always looking to balance that roster to make sure that we're offering a wide variety of art. And all the current roster artist grant recipients were selected by that review panel based on the following qualifications. So when you're thinking about your program and you're thinking about your experience, these are the 3 topics to make sure you're covering in your explanation of your proposal. You're going to demonstrate the quality of your artistic work, an indication of exceptional talent within your art form, whatever that may be. You have a complete description of your idea of your touring program. What are you going to do? What do you want to do when you go out and you travel throughout the state? It could be showcasing what you have done in the past, and maybe it's a little different going forward. That's okay. Also show your ability or your potential to book a successful tour. And that's where that experience really comes into play. You need to be able to show a positive and successful record of being able to work with organizations, and so that those organizations, schools, communities, so they can count on you, that you're reliable, that you have a good track record. And we'll go on to the next slide. And this is when we say how you're compensated through the touring arts program. So to clarify, when you hear someone say, oh, well, they're on the touring arts roster for that 2-year period, what's happening there is that that artist has applied for a grant touring arts grant from the South Dakota Arts Council. And in that way, they get on the roster. And so for that 2-year period, what we're looking at going forward for our current application that's open, and the deadline is September 1st, they're applying now for a period of time that is the touring arts program that runs from 2023 through 2024. And so we have a fiscal year, July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023. And then the second year is July 1st, 23 to June 30th, 2024. So you kind of got to keep that in mind. What you're applying for now is not until the start in July of the following year. And so you receive the same award provided each year. And that is, of course, as most of our grants, pending federal and state appropriations. Our touring arts grants assist in funding presentations and performances in communities across South Dakota. So when we say they assist, meaning you may continue to tour and work with organizations that may not be a 501c3 nonprofit, or let's say a for-profit business hires you to come and perform, keep on doing that. What we're interested in is providing funding so that you can perform and working with nonprofits across South Dakota. That's the incentive. Recipients of the touring arts grants are listed in a 2-year touring arts roster. And so keeping that in mind when you hear someone say, oh, they're on the roster, that's what that means. They have been selected by our review grants panels to be on that roster and then marketed throughout the state as on the South Dakota Arts Council touring arts roster. The touring artists or ensembles on the roster then are responsible for booking engagements and events with eligible hosts, sponsors. So we don't own your schedule. You continue to schedule your own tour and program throughout the state, but you have to work with 501c3 nonprofits, public schools, government entities, so like cities and communities, or institutions of higher learning. Those are the folks that you need to work with through this program to receive support. And it is an incentive for the host sponsor organization, as because they can pay the artist 50% of their normal performance fee, and then we match that 50% fee for the total artist's fee. And this payment to the artist comes from the amount awarded to the artist, the touring arts grant recipient. So let's say that you are a recipient of a grant and your normal fee is $1,000. So the contract that you will write up, that we will provide for you between you and the sponsor would pay $500, and then $500 will come to you from your grant award here at the South Dakota Arts Council. So we'll continue to the next slide. And we mentioned a little bit about marketing. And so how do touring artists find host or sponsor organizations? And truly, the touring artists are responsible for booking and contracting directly with sponsors. And like I said, keep in mind, they always have to be 501c3 nonprofit, public school, government entity, or institution of higher learning. And we really rely on our partners, such as Art South Dakota, who are those megaphones for the arts across the state. And they've got several resources, as do we, in reaching out to nonprofit organizations and all of the folks you see listed here. And we, in a myriad of ways, will do that through webinars, our Facebook page, social media in general, our emails, and also you'll hear from nonprofits calling us, finding out who's on the roster. And so it's also advertised on our website. And so we'll continue to the next slide, and this is the touring arts profile sample. And I won't get too deep into this, but this is just a little summary of what we are looking for and how to think about how you explain yourself. As an artist that wants to tour across the state, you need to be able to explain your work and share your goals and objectives for sharing your work with South Dakotans across the state, like I've said. In the narrative, your artwork, you have to describe yourself. Imagine describing yourself to a potential host, describing your program, how you would entice a group to hire you. It's the same thing there. We need to have you explain how you will market yourself. The management of your program is also very important. So you should be able to describe your ability to handle your tour or program arrangements, how you budget for a tour, and how you calculate the associated costs, and how you can work with a sponsor to negotiate a fee based on what they're looking for. And the logistics are also important. How do you tour with the physical space that you need? Describe any sound amplification that you need. Lighting is also important. Equipment, technical requirements, all of that you should know ahead of time and be able to include in your proposal. And finally, also list and describe any additional programs or services, such as workshops, master classes, and also when we say additional programming, we add residencies here, but you shouldn't limit yourself. What are you capable of doing as a touring artist? What are you open to? And make sure you include those types of additional programming, because you never know when you're negotiating a event or engagement with a host sponsor, they may want to know a little bit more about what you can do. And so finally, we're looking at the required application materials. This is an explanation between promotional materials that are important and also support materials. And so those promotional materials are truly marketing materials, press releases, brochures and posters, direct mailings, sample programs. They should demonstrate your performance and your touring experience. And also it should be relative to the work that you will be performing. Sometimes you may run across, here are all the promotional materials that I've done in the past, and here's the work I've done. It might be a little different than what you propose to do, but that's okay. We want to be able to show the review panel the quality of the work you've done before. The support materials are reviews, articles from the newspaper, and then also recommendations from presenters who have worked with you. Evaluations come in handy too. So if you are someone who has been on the roster before, those positive evaluations that have come back come in handy in support materials as well. And again, support materials should relate to the work that will be performed as part of your activities. And so we'll move to the next slide. And this is the point where I'm going to stop, and Andrew and Rebecca, I'm going to open up for questions now for the Touring Arts program.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. We'll get these slides back up with the contact info, and also wanted to make sure everyone knows that we will send out a PDF version of the slides for later reference so you can see those samples and get all of the links. A couple of good questions have come in. So Sarah, one from Randall, do institutions of higher learning include private schools or just public or state universities and such?
We want to work with 501c3 nonprofit, and when we're talking about schools, the main goal is that each engagement or event is open to the public. And Kate, if you want to join in on the conversation, you may do so at this time.
Sure. So when we talk about places of higher learning, Randall, those would be public education. So those are public schools that are already being supported, through state funds, federal funds, et cetera. If you're looking at private entities, those private school entities would have to be registered 501c3s. And a lot of those private schools may not directly be registered 501c3s, but they may have a PTO or a parent-teacher association or a foundation that is a registered 501c3. So there's a few things just to keep in mind as you're looking at educational facilities, places of higher learning, and the like. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Kate.
Great. Then another question from Alan and Jill. Can artists book a series of engagements with a 501c3 organization, or can you only do one presentation per organization?
So going into 23-24, we do have the opportunity for for groups to work with a series, and I'm thinking of Alan and Jill touring, and we have one contract, and it might be for a 2-day event, and so it's like per event. And Kate, if you wanted to jump in on that too to explain, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I just had a question very similar from somebody currently on the roster this week. We would hate for an artist to be dinged for multiple day events at any one organization. But like Sarah was saying, moving into the 23-24, we would like to see artists participating with host organizations on 2 contracts. So like Alan and Jill, if you had a contract, I'm just going to use High Plains Western Heritage Center because I know that you guys are buddies. Let's say you and Carla enter into a contract that's 4 Tuesdays in a row for a month. And then you have another contract with Carla for, let's say that was in September, and in February, you want to do another 4 Tuesdays a month. That would be okay, but that would kind of limit you out on engagements with the High Plains Western Heritage Center. So we just want to see artists kind of spreading their wings a little bit, getting out of the home community, as well as spreading out from those organizations that maybe become very comfortable or familiar to them. And get them out into other organizations. So that's a little bit of a shift for us. Again, it wouldn't prohibit you from multiple day engagements at any one location, but we'd really only like to see 2 contracts coming in from that organization for a single artist or ensemble.
Great, thanks, Kate. So from Melissa, this is another good question for the touring arts roster. Basically, when you're on the roster, is there a set dollar amount to the grant available for that touring artist? I assume the way Melissa wrote it, and this is something I think we'll come back to for the full Q&A, for the touring arts roster, it is the artist that gets paid. And so what is that set dollar amount for the artist? Whereas we'll talk later about artists in schools and communities and how that's the organization. So I just wanted to quick clarify that too for Melissa.
And so I can answer that question. When it comes to the set fees, it is up to the artist. Most of the artists have a range. So for instance, we have one of our artists who has, it is kind of a negotiation with the sponsor. And so their regular artist fee is between $500 and $1,500 because that artist also offers an extra additional programming if they want to hire her to have her main presentation, and then also there is the option to have additional programming in the form of a class. And so it all depends on what the sponsoring organization would like. And so it is nice to have a range, but it is truly up to the artist to determine what their set fee is, and it will be marketed as such.
And then I'm not sure if this was a part of Melissa's question, but just to clarify in case, then you get a total grant award for the year where you can write up to a certain amount of reimbursement from the Arts Council, correct? So there is a cap over the course of the year, which is the grant award amount.
That's a great question, Andrew, and thanks for clarifying. When the applicant makes their proposal in their grant application, they're working on their budget, how much should I ask for from the South Dakota Arts Council to tour throughout the state? They do have to consider what their set fee, what they want for each performance. And then if in the end with their grant, I'm looking up because this is my list of my performers here, when they're asking for that total fee per year, so they're looking at each year for a full year, how much they would like to request from the South Dakota Arts Council, then let's say it's $5,000. They have to be able to budget and pace themselves out throughout that whole year of booking in order to understand how they will tour throughout the state at $500 each, let's say. I hope I'm not explaining that very well, but truly they have to ask for, so it's one single year, their request is based on how many performances they want to book throughout the year. It has to equal that $5,000.
Yep. So it would be, you write it for a set amount, and then that is the maximum you can get. That said, and if I'm putting words in anyone's mouth, please correct me. I do know from some other experience that the Arts Council is often very flexible as far as if there's a unique opportunity, if certain funding has opened up for one reason or another, and there's extra touring funds available. Oftentimes, I know you're willing to entertain, hey, this opportunity came up. Is there any ability to increase my award? You're at least open to that conversation, correct?
We are open to that conversation, and when and if funds are available, but they should not count on it.
Great. So a couple other questions kind of specific to touring arts, and then I think we'll double back to some larger scale questions. Another one from Alan and Jill. Do touring artists also receive mileage and lodging above the performance fee? Does that come out of the grant award, or is that all just wrapped up into the total fee for performance, for travel, for lodging, all of that, as opposed to the artists in schools and communities?
Great questions. The grant amount, the amount that comes from the South Dakota Arts Council, we pay for the artist's performance. We're paying for the art form to be in that community. And the match is supplied by the sponsoring organization, and they also pay for travel and accommodations or lodging if that's required by the artist. So that's on the sponsor or host organization.
Great. Let's see here. Just parsing through the questions. So doubling back to the school question, and maybe Kate can jump in on this one from Phil. So I think he's asking, is the Catholic school eligible for touring funds? His real question is, school assemblies aren't generally open as a public performance. So wanting to clarify that public aspect. Obviously, if the Catholic school would have to pay you through a 501c3 foundation or parent-teacher group or something like that, if they are not themselves a 501c3. But could you clarify that aspect of the public performance if it's for potentially for school children?
Yeah, and really where we land with public, open to the public for school performances, thank you for that, Phil, that's a good question, is that we just want to make sure that that's open up to the school community as a whole, so parents are aware of it. It's a all school assembly if it were. There's enough time for teachers and parents to be aware of that program happening, so that if I had a kindergartner at a Catholic school and they were presenting Phil Baker and I want to go in and see it, I should be aware of that ahead of that event taking place. So that's kind of where we fall with open to the public for school events. Obviously, for a myriad of safety reasons, events taking place in a school are not going to be open door to anyone walking in, but we just want to make sure that, again, teachers, parents, and the like are aware of that event taking place so that they can participate if they are able and invited to. As far as it being a Catholic school, just like Andrew said, it would need that application, that contract would need to come in through a registered 501c3, as that would be a private school. And then as we're talking about things happening in a religious environment, I would just remind touring artists that events that are being supported through the touring arts program cannot take place during a religious service. They can take place in a place of worship or in a religious facility. They just, again, would need to be open to the public and available for everyone to participate.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. So it's really quickly, before getting to a couple other questions, I think, because this is the programs in some ways are so, they're very similar with different directions almost. And so I think it was really helpful early on with that overview slide, which again will be in the PDFs, but maybe just for the attendees real quick again, Sarah and Rebecca, kind of that 10-second elevator pitch of the two programs in the direction that the booking happens. So for instance, if I'm understanding this correctly, and I'm probably not, so please correct me, for the artists in schools and communities, the grant goes to an organization. That organization reaches out to book you. You also do some work with them and talk to them as an artist to try to get on their radar so that they want to book you. But the general direction is the organization focused. And then the other option is on the touring artist side. The grant is to the touring artist themselves. Then they book a show with a nonprofit and say, hey, I've got this touring arts grant, so my total fee would be this. You need to cover that, and my grant will cover the other half. So it seems like different goals for the program, but similar programs, just kind of different directions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Andrew,
That was a great summary, Andrew.
It was, and I can jump in with a couple of major clarifications here, and will actually knock out a few of the questions in the chat. So for one, and a really important distinction is that these are not, grants for artist projects or anything like that. These are grants that are meant to get high quality artist performances and residencies out to the people of South Dakota in their own communities. So that's the goal here that we're focused on. Yes, artists are paid in that process, but the overall goal is arts education and opportunities for the people of South Dakota, in conjunction with paying artists for the excellent work they do. So a big difference between the programs: touring arts works for people who want to do short, one-time performances, or maybe a performance and a workshop. So those are like a 1, 2, maybe 3-day event where you're focused on serving this community for these couple days with these couple of performances or presentations. The Artists in Residence program means you're in residence and you're working in that community for an extended period, a minimum of 1 week. So those are the really big differences for how the artists will be working. But yes, the other big difference is how they're financed, or how the payment goes through. And the simple explanation for that is that touring artists are awarded a grant, which we keep in-house. We don't put out the whole grant amount to a touring artist at the beginning of the fiscal year. We keep those funds in-house and we pay them per contract as we go through the year. So touring artists manage their own budget. So they'll know what their grant amount is and they're responsible for managing their own budget. For the residency program, we have an overall budget and we manage that in-house and pay. And because the sponsor organizations, the schools, the art centers are coming to us to apply for those funds, we pay them and then they pay the artist. Does that make sense? Does that help clear a few things up?
I think it does. I think that really helps. And I know so Chris, to answer a couple of your questions, I think that's where it is a little different than some other states are set up a little bit differently. So, Chris was asking, he's from Illinois and the Illinois Arts touring roster. So he's saying he gets the sense that the artists propose an amount of work for touring arts, then try to book it, which seems to be the case for touring arts. And then the other question for Chris that I think might help is he's wondering if there's any assistance for doing any block booking. So obviously they're doing the artists have to do the work, but is there any assistance from the Arts Council as far as, hey, I'm from Illinois, I'm coming in, I'm trying to do multiple residencies, I'm trying to do multiple portions of the artists in schools and communities, say, is there any help of like, hey, I've got this one lined up, can you recommend someone else I should try to talk to, or something like that to help with block booking?
I think I've had a lot of these kinds of questions over the years, and I think some of the best resources for that are the communities that you're working in. Because if you are working with Stacy in Aberdeen and you say, hey, do you know who else around here I might work with? She has a lot of those contacts. Arts South Dakota does have great lists of local arts councils, performance venues, and we're happy to help you find those. You could also just call our offices and say, hey, do you have any ideas for me on this? we don't have any official process to do that, but we love talking to you all and providing that guidance.
Yep, definitely. And so, as Rebecca mentioned, Arts South Dakota has a series of arts directories on our website. I definitely would recommend for anyone looking in communities, the local community arts councils are one of the first places to start. They are almost all 501c3 nonprofits, but then also they'll really know so much about their community and their region. So even if they don't have any opportunities for you, they'll be really embedded in their local community to be able to help you find additional help. Great. Okay, a couple of more questions, and then I think there's going to be a couple that we don't get to in the Q&A, but if we don't get to your question, please know that I'll be forwarding along your email from the registration as well as your question to the Arts Council so that we can make sure that you get your questions answered. But as we're talking about the broader scope of it, a question again from Randall is, can you be both a touring artist and be on the Artists in Schools and Communities roster?
Yes, you can. And we have a few who do that.
Perfect. And so again, that's in large part because the touring artist side is a grant to the artist, and then the Artists in Schools and Communities is the organization that is hiring an artist. And so you can do both because one grant is to an org, one is to the artist. So it's not double dipping, so to speak.
Right. And actually, Andrew, our roster programs are exempt from the other grant pools for South Dakota Arts Council. So if
Great.
you are on one of our artist rosters, you're still eligible for artist grants through the South Dakota Arts Council.
Great. That's good. That's good to know. So that if you're also applying, say, for a project grant, or you just received a project grant that was just announced a couple of weeks ago, you would still be able to apply to be on the rosters.
Correct.
Great. Let's see here. So then I'm looking through, and I think that just about covers it. I mean, I think maybe the last clarifying question is just to Alan and Jill again, is just so they're just asking, how is that total grant limit for the touring artist? Obviously, the touring artist applies for a certain amount of money, but is there a cap to that amount, or is there any other, is it just what the artist thinks they can do in a year, that's what they apply for, or is there a maximum grant that you can request?
Thank you, Andrew. It is truly request what you think that you can properly accommodate as a traveling and touring artist. And what you apply for isn't always funded in full. And so also consider that. We have to work within a budget.
Great. Well, I am going to pop back up the Arts Council's contact info. I just wanted to say thank you all so much for coming today. Reach out to any of us at any time at either Arts South Dakota or the South Dakota Arts Council. We're happy to help with any questions you have. Really, we would like to be of service to you and everything that you're doing to bring arts around the state. These programs are so exciting because they're a way to make sure that we can get the arts embedded in every community across South Dakota, where there's amazing work happening, and really help to develop these local arts communities and expose children and others to a lot of great opportunities they wouldn't have otherwise. You'll be able to find past webinars on our website at artsouthdakota.org. The recording of this session, as well as the slides, will be up in the archives within about 24 hours and will also be emailed out to you, so you can go back, rewatch any of this, and have the slides to look through. You can please contact me, Andrew, at artsouthdakota.org. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas for future professional development sessions or webinars. And then as you can see here, you have both Sarah and Rebecca's contact info on the screen, and the Arts Council is happy to help at any time. And just wanted to say thank you again so much to Rebecca and Sarah for your time today, and for the wonderful voice of Kate Vandell jumping in to clarify a couple of things as well. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and thank you to all the attendees.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And I'll just put in one final quick plug that every Thursday from now through until the week of September 1st, when the grant deadline is, Sarah or I will be hosting live chats 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain on Thursdays. You can find information to register for those live chats on our website and also on our social media platforms. Those are just, hop in, ask your questions. We can have a back and forth if you're trying to figure out how to make your application work better. But anybody is welcome to join those. Of course, when Sarah's hosting, she'll have more touring arts knowledge. And when I'm hosting, I'll have more artists in schools and communities program knowledge. But feel free to join either, and we'll try to get you helped out during those.
Great, and I'll make sure to add that link to the follow-up email to all the attendees as well. Great. Well, thank you all again so much. We really appreciate your time today, and we look forward to more opportunities to connect, especially, start saving the date and be on the lookout for the May 2022. It's hard to say that date. I don't know. It seems like not that long ago that was in the distant future, but May 2022, we will be back all together for the State Arts Conference out in Rapid City, and a number of other events and happy hours and professional development opportunities before then. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.